Guys, I have been loving Final Fantasy 16. The game is so pretty, and it's so good, and it's so pretty, and it's so good. And I would much rather be sitting on my couch right now playing Final Fantasy 16 than sitting over here in these hot lights making a YouTube video and talking to you. I actually don't mean that. I love you guys. And I thank you guys for watching my videos. I just bought a new camera because of you guys. You guys did that, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for being entertained. Pretty cool. But there's been something that's been bothering me about Final Fantasy for quite a while now, and it's ever since the game was initially announced when we saw one of the first trailers, and it was that the game is so pretty. It's so pretty. But it's not using any of the engines that any other Square Enix or any other Final Fantasy game has been using. So what engine is it using? And that is a question that's been asked to the developers many times, but every single time they have given a non-answer. So I did some digging, and I found some things. And I'm going to share those things with you guys today. So we're going to hop down a rabbit hole and put on our tinfoil hats and enjoy the ride. So back in March, Naoki Yoshida was in an interview with WCCF Tech, and he was asked the question, with this Final Fantasy game specifically being made for the PlayStation 5, has the Luminous Productions assisted in Creative Business Unit 3's development of Final Fantasy 16? Will there be newer technologies that were in Forspoken or any of the direct storage usage that they used or anything like that in Final Fantasy 16? And Naoki Yoshida responded, to talk about the business a little bit, Forspoken and Final Fantasy 16 began development around the same time, with Final Fantasy 16 is actually using an engine that they have created themselves specifically for Final Fantasy 16. So there isn't a lot of sharing of technology between Forspoken and the Final Fantasy teams. Yoshida confirmed this further in another interview, stating, "We don't get asked this very often, but it's not the Unreal Engine or the Luminous Productions engine. It's a technology that we have developed in Creative Business Unit 3 for Final Fantasy 16. There's a reason we didn't use Luminous. When we started working on Final Fantasy 16, they were still working on Final Fantasy 15, I think the DLC at the time. They hadn't created a manual for Luminous yet, so the studio couldn't provide us with support because they were still focused on their own game, so we knew it wasn't going to work out." When asked about the engine itself, the developers had joked around with each other. It seems like they haven't chosen a name for it yet. Everyone asks us the name, but we just haven't decided yet. Now, we could simply brush this off as they haven't named the engine yet, but something doesn't quite sit right with me. See, this game is made by Creative Business Unit 3, a unit that has been pretty much dedicating all of their time to the development of Final Fantasy 14 and all of its expansions, which is quite a lot of work, and we're to believe that this team somehow developed a completely new engine and learned it in time to make Final Fantasy 16. That just doesn't sound right. And I'm about 17 hours into Final Fantasy 16, and I started to notice something that I don't think anybody else is paying attention to. Well, not unless you've played Final Fantasy 14. Slowly but surely, I started to notice that there were a lot of similarities to Final Fantasy 14, namely dialogue with NPCs following similar patterns and gestures that we see in Final Fantasy 14. The motions of the hands, how we interact with NPCs, their facial expressions, even the animation of reaching out to hand them an item they sent us to go look for. It all has a striking resemblance to Final Fantasy 14. Honestly, maybe it's just the tinfoil hat. However, even entering into combat feels almost the same as Final Fantasy 14. The only thing that's different is, well, the tab target to start the fight. The picture becomes even clearer when you start looking at maps and how we section off certain areas and how we use Aetheryte to be able to teleport around the world. Now, this could all be artistic coincidence. I mean, it is the same dev team, some of the same artists. Of course, there are going to be some similarities. And then I saw it. The one thing that sold me on this, the one thing that made me dig into this rabbit hole and go looking for what exactly this engine is. End of battle animations. I'm adding this in after the fact. This is a slight spoiler warning. This is 15 hours into the game. It's a short cutscene, but it's actually the beginning of battle animations. It's pulling out the weapons, but it's not only just the Dark Knight, it's actually the warrior as well, and I didn't realize it until I watched it again. If you look at any cutscene where you guys were in a fight and your character goes to sheath their weapon, in some of the in-game style cutscenes, not the in-engine ones, It's the same sheathing of the blade in the cutscene that you would see from a Dark Knight. The exact same animation. This is Final Fantasy XIV's engine. So I dug deep and I found an obscure Japanese developer article from back in 2022 that covers a technical presentation by the Final Fantasy XVI staff in 2018. But now keep in mind, back in 2018, Final Fantasy XVI was still a secret project. It hadn't been announced yet. But if you look at the armor in these pictures, it's the same armor in Final Fantasy XVI's Imperial Knights. And one of the face models is Hiroshi Takai, the director of Final Fantasy XVI. According to the article, in the initial stages, verification was conducted using Unreal Engine 4 and the real-time visualization software Marmoset Toolbag. But it was difficult for them to reach the finer details. So the Final Fantasy XIV engine was extended to allow rendering in a PBR environment, and a full-time programmer was assigned to build the environment and shader area. PBR is physical-based rendering. It's a shading model. It aims to create more realistic lighting and environments and create better lighting physics, which give us that accurate look of how fabrics and things like that look in Final Fantasy XVI. Something that the Luminous engine could not provide for them. Now, developers use a myriad of tools when they're making games, and to be honest with you, I make YouTube videos as a hobby, and I work in construction full-time, so I have no idea how this stuff is actually really put together. But if any of this is true, if what this article is saying, and then also what I have found in the games to be actually factually true, then that means that Final Fantasy XIV's engine is a part of Final Fantasy XVI. It was extended to make Final Fantasy XVI, and if that's the case, then that means very, very good things for the future of Final Fantasy XIV, or potentially a future MMO. You have to keep in mind that Yoshida did develop a completely new version, the 2.0 version of Final Fantasy XIV, while still actively supporting the 1.0 version of Final Fantasy XIV, where they came out with The Realm Reborn, which led to the resurrection of what everyone thought was going to be a dead MMO. And also keep in mind that we already know that they plan on doing massive visual improvements to Final Fantasy XIV in the 7.0 patch that they have coming probably next year, right? Or end of this year. Announcements on that will be towards the end of the month. So, with all of their experience making Final Fantasy XVI and this expanded engine that they've been working on, there's a really good chance that we're going to start seeing some really interesting changes in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I'm not saying that Final Fantasy XIV is going to look like Final Fantasy XVI, but there is a really good chance that a lot of these things that they've developed through Final Fantasy XVI will be implemented to Final Fantasy XIV over time. And we could see, as they start to leave the older generation systems behind, the PlayStation 3 namely, they may start to develop a better-looking Final Fantasy XIV on and on into the future through each consecutive expansion, getting us closer and closer to the fidelity of a Final Fantasy XVI. And, whew, man, that would be real nice. So, these are just my theories. These are the things that I've found. Whether or not you guys think they're true, that's up to you. You guys tell me whether you guys have seen some similarities of Final Fantasy XIV within Final Fantasy XVI. You can tell me if I'm crazy, and that's fine. But I just thought you guys would like to know. So, yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys have a good day. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. The cat's taking a nap, so I can't really show him to you right now. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Thank you guys for subscribing. This has been so much fun, and I just can't wait to do more. So, see you guys later. Peace.